Well, hello Internet. I'm back today to do one of my favorite videos that I love doing for the channel, and that is a director's ranked list. And today I'm going to be talking about one of the filmmakers that I have not discussed yet on my channel, and that is Taika Waititi. I was introduced to Taika Waititi's work through What We Do in the Shadows. I thought it was a super unique and interesting comedy that was done through that mockumentary film style that I just thought the screenplay was great, the performances were excellent, and it's one of those moments where I'm sure you've had it as someone who appreciates film, where you watch a movie from a director you've never seen before and you're just enamored with it immediately, and you want to watch everything they've ever made, and that was the case for me and Taika Waititi. And I have now seen all of the films that he has currently made. I am going to, in this video, rank them from my least favorite to my favorite. And as always, I've said this in my other ranked list videos, this is just my opinion. This isn't fact. I'm not an expert by any means. This is just the way that I love his films and what they mean to me and the order in which I appreciate them. As always, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. And leave me a comment down below and let me know what your least favorite and favorite Taika Waititi films are. Without further ado, let's get into the list. So Taika Waititi currently has 6 feature films. Like I said, I'm going to rank them from least favorite to my favorite. So without further ado, here is number 6. So coming in at number 6 is going to be Taika Waititi's debut, Eagle vs. Shark. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. It was one of the last in his filmography for me to watch, and I enjoyed it. It definitely showcases how he developed his style and where he's come as a filmmaker. And what I really appreciate whenever you watch a director's filmography is watching their early work and seeing trademarks and hallmarks of their style that translate throughout their entire catalog. And Waititi has a very specific visual style. Similar to Wes Anderson, he really likes to utilize static camera shots where everything is locked down on a tripod. He really likes to utilize the frame. There's very wide shots. It's a lot of comedy involved with the way that the camera is placed and what it's showcasing at a specific period of time. And that translates throughout his entire filmography. And I feel like Eagle vs. Shark is a great example of how this has started. You can get an idea of not only Waititi's visual style, but his sense of dark comedy that exists throughout his entire filmography. And he's really great about incorporating really dark comedy amidst some moments where you're just like, wow, you shouldn't be laughing at this period in time, but it works. This movie has some really funny moments. My favorite element of this film is Jermaine Clement. I think he gives an incredible performance. He's hilarious. He's just such a charismatic and fun individual that I really like in everything that he's in. And this movie's no exception. As funny as it is to say, this movie sort of reminds me of like Napoleon Dynamite. You have this video game tournament as the backdrop for the overall plot. Relationship between Jermaine Clement and Lauren Taylor, and it works really well. And these actors both give a great performance. It's absolutely hilarious at moments. There's some stuff in the third act that just like blew me away that he was able to get away with, just how like absurd the material is. But yeah, it's a really fun and entertaining film. I think what sets it back for me a little bit is the screenplay isn't perfect. There's some slow moments through it that don't really exist in the remainder of his films. You could definitely tell it's an early work. It's not to say that I don't enjoy this movie. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it'd be even more fun with multiple revisits, but that's why it's coming in last place for me on his list. Coming in at number 5 is Waititi's Marvel film, Thor Ragnarok. I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. This is one of the Marvel films where you can really feel the trademarks of a director translating into the film. My problem with Disney and Marvel in general is that they don't give artists the independent and creative voices that they deserve when they're making their films, because at the end of the day, they're selling a product. They're trying to put a product out there, and they've had this formula that they've created over the years. And they're absolutely terrified that if they stray away from this formula, that's not going to work. It's clearly obvious that they're contradicting themselves when you look at James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy films. they've essentially given James Gunn complete creative control over those movies, and those are some of my favorite films in the entire Marvel universe. They're so well structured, they have great performances, they're fun, they feel like a comic book movie, and I love those films. And I think it's because Marvel leaves James Gunn alone. And when you look at the case of like Edgar Wright when he was directing the Ant-Man film, and they said it's too much of an Edgar Wright movie, you can't make this, and that he ended up leaving because he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do with the film. And it's really disheartening to me that filmmakers don't get a unique voice in the Marvel universe because Marvel's so concerned with selling a product. In this case, in Thor Ragnarok, I feel like you do get Waititi's voice in this movie, especially with the relationship between Thor and the Hulk. A lot of the dialogue really feels Taika Waititi heavy, where it feels like his really deadpan delivery of humor. Even the camera work feels similar to him. The incorporation of the character of Korg, played by Waititi himself. It's just really great to see a Marvel movie that has that artist's voice. My biggest qualm with this film is actually the Cate Blanchett plotline. I feel like that's Marvel shoehorning in we've got to have a big villain. If we don't have a big villain, no one's going to watch this movie. But I think if it was up to Waititi himself, he probably would have just kept it the buddy comedy between Thor and the Hulk, and then fighting Jeff Goldblum at the end of the film, and I think it would have been a much more effective movie. That's not to say I don't really enjoy it. I like it a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. It's why it beats out Eagle vs. Shark on this list, because I think it's a little bit more fun than that movie. It's one in the Marvel universe where a lot of those movies I leave the theater and I'm like, I don't ever have to watch that again. This is one where I was like, yeah, I would enjoy watching that again because it's way better than any of the other Thor movies that exist, especially like Thor the Dark World. Oh my god, that movie was terrible. I hated that movie. Waititi should be left in charge of the Thor franchise for the rest of the time it exists. I know he's doing the next one. I'm sure it will be great and that I will enjoy it quite a bit, but that is why it is number 5 on my list. Coming in at number 4 is Boy. This movie is fantastic, and it has one of Waititi's most emotional cores to any of his films. You have this young character, Boy, played by James Rolliston, who's obsessed with Michael Jackson. His dad has gone away, seemingly to prison, and he is obsessed with knowing his dad and wanting to get to know his dad, who's played by Taika Waititi. And when he finally comes to town, he's not at all what he expects him to be. And it's a really interesting look at the relationship between an estranged father and son. There's a lot of comedy involved, but there's also a lot of really gritty emotional moments, and it works really well. This movie definitely tugs at the heartstrings in the best way possible. This movie translates what I talked about in Eagle vs. Shark as far as Waititi's visual style. It really works well in this movie. This movie is shot very well. Waititi is clearly someone who cares very deeply for his heritage. This movie's shot in New Zealand. The film is really concerned with the people who live in this area of New Zealand and the cultural aspects that exist there. And you can tell that this is really an introspective look into Waititi's own life and his cultural heritage and the things that he was surrounded by. And this movie is beautiful. My biggest issue with this is there's a couple moments in the screenplay that are just a little slower than his other films. It doesn't 100% work for me, but I do think it's a beautiful little small story about a father and son and the relationship that they have and the broken relationship that they have. And it's so effective and it works really well. And it's one that I could see myself really enjoying upon revisit. I think it's really well executed. The performances are great, especially Waititi, who putting himself in the film and exploring his own acting abilities and his own work. It's really well done, and this movie is an enjoyable ride. Coming in at number 3 is Waititi's most recent film, Jojo Rabbit. This movie floored me when I saw it in the theater, and I think it's phenomenal. It's really well made. And what I think is really great about this movie, and I know there was some discourse surrounding it when the film was first released because of what the subject matter entails, and I think that it's really misunderstood by the general public, and I enjoy it for that exploration reason. So obviously you're looking at Nazi Germany during the Holocaust, and it's a very horrible and terrible time in history where a mass group of people was murdered just because of who they are, just because of their religion and because of their background. And it's one of the most horrific times in history, and we've seen the subject matter explored throughout time and time again with documentaries and movies like Schindler's List and films that explore it at a very gritty, in a gritty way, but we've never seen a movie exploring it with comedic brevity, which I think was a really interesting and bold approach, because obviously anytime you look at something that heady or serious, if you take it in a comedic tone, it's going to come back with some backlash. But I think this movie does have a genuinely beautiful and human core, like all of Waititi's other work. You look at this story of a mother who is a political activist who's trying to fight against the Hitler regime, and she's doing everything that she can to stop this horrible thing that's occurring in her country. And Scarlett Johansson gives a phenomenal performance in this film. And as you're watching it, she has a son who, because he's a child, he's easily malleable, like a lot of other children in this time period are manipulated to love Hitler. And he is taught that that's who he should be, and he looks up to Hitler. And watching this mother see her child go through this thing where he is dedicating himself to something so evil and horrible, and putting yourself in the shoes of that parent and understanding, like, this is my kid. This is during a time period where you supported the Jewish community. You could be killed. And watching that conflicting nature of this parent going through that and seeing their child deal with it and trying to push back, teach their child what's right. It's just beautiful, and it's human, and it's real, and it feels like real life. And it goes into an exploration that's so unique and visionary as far as looking at the Holocaust. And then obviously you have Waititi playing this overblown caricature of Hitler in Jojo's mind. And I think that that's really hilarious, and it adds a different element to the film, and it paints Hitler as a moron, which I think is hysterical. And I love that Taika Waititi, having those Jewish roots in his background, really translates this material really well. And I'm not sure why there was a backlash to this film, or that people were upset with it, other than it is taking on a very serious subject matter and putting it on the screen. But I think it's just beautiful. It has an amazing soundtrack, it has incredible performances, and it's a film that I could see working its way up the list. I just like two of his other movies a little bit more. Coming in at number 2 is What We Do in the Shadows. I talked about this before. This was my introduction to Waititi's filmmaking, and I really enjoy this. I think Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi's friendship really blossoms and shows in this film, and the amount of care and time they put into the screenplay and the overall presentation of this. Obviously, it's a mockumentary, so the cinematography isn't the most important element, but just the performances are what make this film. And I think the two of them are absolutely hilarious, and every time I watch this movie, I find it funnier. And obviously, it's inspired the FX TV series, which is also hilarious, and everyone should watch that. There's something about this movie and the introduction of, like, the werewolves into it and all the supernatural elements and just how dumb these people are. And it's so much fun, and I love that about this movie. It's just a fun, enjoyable vampire movie that looks at vampires through a very unique and interesting lens. And there are some gags in this movie that are a little dated, but that still make me laugh so hard every time I watch it. It's just a really fun, entertaining film that juggles horror and comedy really well, and it translates a lot of TT's signature style that exists in all of his other films. And I think it's one of the best in his catalog, and I think everyone should see it at least once. Coming in at number 1 is The Hunt for the Wilder People. This is not only my favorite Waititi film, it's one of my favorite films of all time. It has such a beautiful emotional core. It is heartbreaking, it's hilarious, it's just incredible, and I absolutely love it. Julian Dennison plays Ricky, a young boy who loses his parents, and he's put into this foster home with Sam Neill and his wife. And the wife is just such a loving, compassionate, and caring human being who loves this young boy, even though he's just been introduced into her life. And early on in the film, she passes away. And Sam Neill is left to take care of this young boy. And Sam Neill clearly wants nothing to do with it. He's not interested in it. He doesn't care about doing it, but he does it because he loves his wife, and his wife is gone. And it's about the blossoming relationship and friendship between these two people who are unlikely friends. And it is beautiful and heartbreaking. And they're on the run together for a reason I won't get into. It's fantastic. Sam Neill gives probably the best performance of his career. He is incredible in this movie. Everyone else, the entire cast of characters, is wonderful. The soundtrack's great. The cinematography is beautiful in this movie. Taika Waititi's cameo is absolutely hilarious, but this movie has a deep emotional core that doesn't exist in all of his other films, but that I feel like really showcases his talent as a screenwriter in this movie, and it's just fantastic. and I really love this movie a lot, and upon revisiting it, it just gets better. And it's one that I'm going to continue to watch over and over again. I think everyone should see it at least once. It's really overlooked, which surprises me. I know there's people that see it and have a true connection and love for the film, and there's a lot of people who've never watched it once. And I think as far as Waititi's catalog, if you're going to pick one movie to watch out of his films, Hunt for the Wilder People is the one I would recommend. So how close is my list to yours? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what your list looks like for Taika Waititi's films. As always, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know what type of content that you guys are looking for. As always, Internet, thanks so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.